Howdy, and welcome to another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I'm your host, Daniel Dolphin.
I wanted to take just a minute on this podcast episode to tell you a little bit about the online course that we are offering now, the Bit Course 2.0, Understanding How and Why Bits Function. You can find it at the website, thebitcourse.com, which will be linked in the show notes. This is a very comprehensive course. We've got two different versions. There's a masterclass version where weekly we have live calls and go over the modules and the study guide. That course has been running 25 to 30 hours over the course of 7 weeks. If you take that version, you're also eligible to go through our BIT certification program and take that test. It's at no additional cost if you want to add consulting about bits to your repertoire of body work or whatever else you might be doing. We also will have an evergreen version that you can take anytime you work at your own pace. It is less expensive. It's also a lot less content. You don't have the weekly Zoom calls with me. Those are going about 2 to 2.5 hours each week. So the masterclass course winds up 25, 30 hours long. The evergreen course you're going to do in 12 to 15, something like that. So check it out. You can go to thebitcourse.com, sign up for the free newsletter. You'll get a 30-minute video on the foamy mouth and all of the implications of that, as well as 5 or 6 articles that I've written regarding bits. Get a feel for the content. This will absolutely be some of the best money and time you have ever spent on your horsemanship journey, I assure you. And it is not discipline specific. We cover just about every aspect of the horse world that you can think of. I'm very pleased to have our guest today on the podcast. I met him at an event with Jim Masterson here this past January. He's one of those guys I've been wanting to meet and get to watch work for a long time. Mr. Mark Rashid is an internationally known author and horseman known for his ability to understand the horse's point of view and solve difficult problems with communication rather than force. He began working with horses at age 10 when he met the old man who taught him to work with horses, not against them, and to listen to what the horse is trying to say. Mark's clinics are structured as one-on-one work with horses and riders and are immensely popular with people around the world. He brought the same quiet determination to it that he exhibits in his work with horses when he started practicing Aikido. He has earned a 3rd-degree black belt in Yoshinkan Aikido and now teaches the way of harmony in the local dojo, as well as in his Aikido for horsemanship workshops, which are known also by the name Aibado. When time permits, he still enjoys working on ranches near his home in Colorado, as well as playing guitar professionally with his friends. In addition to playing music, he's also a luthier, making guitars his whole life. Mark has been a guest on NPR's The Horse Show and was featured on the Nature series on PBS. He is the author of 15 books, including his newest, For the Love of the Horse, and such classics as Considering the Horse, Horses Never Lie, Life Lessons from a Ranch Horse, Horsemanship Through Life, Whole Heart, Whole Horse, and Finding the Missed Path, as well as a novel, Out of the Wild. He also has 3 music CDs, Song of the Prairie, Making Good Time, and My Western Town, recorded with his good friend, Brad Fitch. Mark, how are you this morning?
Doing good, Daniel. How you doing getting along today?
Oh, it's always a pleasure when I get to chat with you. I've been looking forward to this one for almost a year now. So
yeah, we talked about it clear back in January or February, I think, this year. So,
well, we do start everybody off with our lightning round questions, and these are for points and prizes. So you want to be on your A game here, Mark.
awesome.
Are you ready?
You bet.
If you were a Jedi, what % chance is there that you would misuse the Force?
0. I don't really know what a Jedi is, but
Okay. Well, you're probably closer to a real life one than you realize, but that's from Star Wars, the Jedi Knights and all.
Yeah, Chrissy knows all about that, but I don't. So
the fantasy fictional world is more her realm. Huh?
Indeed.
Morning or evening?
Morning usually.
You're a real early morning person, or
can be? Yeah, ranching. you're up when the sun comes up, and you go to bed when the work is done. Uh, so I'm usually up by 5:36 every day.
How long do you dunk a cookie in milk?
I don't.
Okay. No cookies. Clean living?
No, no milk.
No milk. Okay.
Yeah.
It has become one of your enemies later in life.
You know, yeah, that's for sure.
I have a touch of that myself.
Yeah.
If people don't recognize Clark Kent because of his glasses, do you think his optometrist knows his secret identity?
No.
What is the best horse movie?
I don't really watch movies, so I'm going to say our movie,
Okay. So
Out of the
which one are you
Wild.
referring to there?
Out of the Wild.
Out of the Wild. Okay.
Yeah,
So
that
that's a
that
movie based on your book?
it was. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
We'll talk a little bit more about that later. What skill or technique do you not have with a horse that you admire in someone else and wish you did have?
That's a good question because I don't really watch other people work. My schedule just doesn't allow for it. Um, so so I don't know, to be honest.
Is there a like when you are still actively learning, is there some sector here like maybe farrier work or dentistry, or your wife is a Masterson method certified practitioner? Is there any of that stuff you would like to go get further into if you had the time, or
Um, Dentistry, maybe. I'm already a trained um, body worker, so um, yeah. I mean, I have a lot on my plate, so it's hard for me to add things without getting rid of something else. Uh, so yeah, and honestly, I'm so busy, I don't get an opportunity to watch other folks work really. So it's not because I don't want to necessarily. It's just that I haven't had the opportunity.
what would you say is the most important quality of a horseman or horsewoman?
I would say being able to keep a quiet mind.
A mind like still water, might you say?
Mind like still water, mizo no kokoro in Japanese.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how well can you back a trailer?
I would say 9 or 10. Been doing it for almost 50 years. So
Bay or sorrel? Do you have any color preference? Could be something else too, but
no, I don't.
a good horse is never a bad color.
Yeah, I mean, we end up with a lot of sorrels just because those are the horses that we feel will work for what we're doing, and not because they were sorrel to begin with. And we also have some bays right now. We have one black horse, but everything else is sorrel or bay.
Dogs or cats?
Dogs,
Any particular breed?
border collies. And we just got a new border collar puppy. So she's, if you hear any yelping, that's probably her.
Little crate training going on right now.
Well, yeah, Chrissy had to go to the store. So we were playing with her all morning in hopes that she would just fall asleep. And I think she did. I don't hear her right now. So
Oh, we won't speak her name and wake her up then. Does pineapple belong on pizza?
sure, why not?
Are you a cook?
I am.
What's your favorite meal to cook?
Um, I do pot roast. In fact, we're going to do that tomorrow night. And yeah, tacos,
Well, tacos is a good. We probably
burritos.
yeah, we eat tacos probably 3 nights a week around here.
Yeah.
With the boys, it's easy. It's, serve yourself kind of a.
Yeah, yeah. Not very time consuming either.
Yes, sir. Would you share with us your horse industry related pet peeve?
Huh. Horse industry pet peeve. Um, I would say it's the idea that people think that horses can be disrespectful.
Feral or spoiled? Which would you rather fool with? And I guess as an add-on, given your last answer, do you believe that there is such a thing as a spoiled horse?
No, there isn't such a thing as a spoiled horse. It's a horse that's been trained to do things that we don't want them to do, usually by neglect or lack of understanding. So, as far as I'm concerned, I would take either one.
Okay. What is your least favorite barn chore?
Huh. I don't really have any.
Do you have a most favorite barn chore?
I don't have one of those either.
It's kind of all the same to you.
Oh,
You live in a world of gray, Mark.
yeah.
Do you have any favorite words of wisdom? So is there like a mantra that let's say your mind isn't still water this morning, somebody threw a bunch of pebbles in there. Do you have like a grounding words of wisdom thing you go to or anything like that?
Yeah, it's all going to work out.
I like it. Crunchy or smooth peanut butter?
Crunchy.
There you go. It's the only right answer.
Yeah, I
I
know,
mean,
right?
that, yeah.
You get crunchy. Yeah, we get crunchy peanut butter here, and Chrissy will feed it to the crows.
So you like it, but she doesn't? Is that how that goes?
I guess that's right.
So I'll just share this with you. We have an inordinate population of crows around Lafayette, which is the biggest town we're near, about 10 or 15 miles away. And I have been playing with that. I have to drive in there to drop my son off to a satellite bus station every morning, of starting to just play with the crows and kind of train them a little bit. But then I have like there's thousands. I mean, they're just
Hmm.
15 minutes of them going from wherever they roost back into the town every morning and evening. And then I'm thinking, well, if I mess that up, I go out of town or something and I'm not there to feed them and I make them mad. That's thousands of crows hunting me down for
Yeah.
retribution. So I decided I did not want to open that can of worms. That if it was three, I would play with it, but
Yeah.
thousands is just too many.
Well, it's funny. Chrissy feeds the crows when we're here, usually when it's cold, on our driveway. And she'll go out and feed them uh, cat food and peanuts and sometimes frozen beef bones and stuff like that. And they will come in 50, 60 at a time, along with the magpies. And then we might not see them for 2 or 3 days. And then if we're gone, they won't see us for sometimes 2, 3 weeks at a time. And we come back home and you hear a crow way off in the distance, and Chrissy will call them and they'll all come in. It's pretty cool thing to
Yes,
watch.
sir. That is I know in your part of the world a lot of people hate magpies, but those birds have such intelligence and everything. I could play with them a lot. I have a bird thing. My grandfather raised all kinds of birds, parrots,
Hmm.
macaws, parakeets. He had thousands. And so falconry is one of my hobbies as
Mm.
well. So
Yeah.
I jam with birds. I like birds a lot.
And my brother is a federally licensed. Uh, he's one of the only ones that are they're able to do birds of prey. He's
Mhm.
actually a bird expert. So my brother
Yes,
is. So he kind of does with birds what I do with horses.
yes, sir.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Would you tell us something unexpected about you? And I'm setting the bar high because you've already got some the luthier, the author, horseman, Aikido. So you're going to have to pull something out of the weeds to shock us here, Mark.
Something unexpected. Huh. I would have to give that some thought. I don't have a ready answer for you.
Okay. Thoughts or feelings? Do you consider yourself more of a cerebral, analytical person or more of a intuitive, go with your gut, feel it out kind of person?
Depends on what's going on.
So a little bit of both there.
Yeah, I would say so. When it comes to horses, it's almost all feel at this point. If I'm if I have an issue or a problem or something outside of that, I usually won't rush into any answers. I'll give it some thought, sometimes overnight or even a couple of days. So if I get a troubling email, for instance, I never answer those right away. So it'll take me a couple of days.
Let me ask you this. This is a thought I've been having for a while. I'm definitely more on the thoughts analytical side of things. But like if I'm working a horse, and especially if it's a tricky horse and maybe one that's a little bit dangerous, then I'm very much going by feel there. And I've kind of come to believe that the feeling side is maybe the more primitive side. So we know something is going on, but maybe we can't explain why or how we know that it's going on. And then we eventually categorize it, organize it, give it words, have language, and then we can rationalize it. And then it's more in the thinking side. So that's kind of how I view it. Like there are things I would feel with a horse now or would have done 10 or 15 years ago that I could now perfectly explain what's going on, but I couldn't have at that point. Does that make sense to you?
Well, that's the difference between having seen an issue the first time and then having seen the issue 1,000 times.
Yes, sir. And then
So it the difference between, say, an expert's brain and somebody who just does it occasionally is you can look at something and your brain doesn't have to work so hard because you've seen it so many times. So if you look at it in an MRI, for instance, or CT, the parts of the brain, almost none of the parts of the brain will light up when you see a problem that the novice, their whole brain would light up, for instance. So the more you see and the more you do, as you become more and more proficient, you don't really have to think about it anymore. It just becomes a thing. You can look at something and almost right away know what it is.
so there may be maybe it's a sandwich kind of a thing. In the beginning, it's feelings and then it's thoughts, so you learn a structure and you can work through that, and then it gets to be feelings again because it is so familiar, kind of like the 4 stages of competency. Like
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to think to walk, but when you were a year old and learning how, it took all of your concentration, something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, yeah, something like that.
What would you have been professionally if not a horseman?
Musician. Yeah,
So
I've
have
been a
you been, I know you play some gigs now and all, have you been playing gigs and things all through, or is this more now you've got a certain level of success with horses and you can go kind of have your playtime on the side with that, or how has that worked for you?
no, I've been a professional musician since I was 13.
Okay.
So yeah, I never stopped playing music.
Are you decisive or indecisive?
It would depend. The truth is that if I'm working with a horse, I'm pretty decisive. I mean, generally within a couple of seconds, I can kind of get to the bottom of an issue. Again, going back to the thing we just talked about, because you see it so many times, you kind of know what it is, unless there's some something else, going on that where you have to give it a little bit of thought. Um, but if it's a problem that comes up that I don't have a lot of experience with, I'm going to have to probably give that some thought before I make a decision.
Fair enough. Do you have a favorite piece of tack or horse-related tool?
Well, I like all my stuff. So, otherwise I wouldn't have it.
Are you a sentimental guy? Like, is there a certain bridle that you would not loan out? Like, that's only mine. That's my baby, and nobody mess with that or anything like that?
I have a bridle and a saddle that was given to me by Walter back when I was a kid. So those two things, the saddle, I need to get the saddle restored, but the bridle, we carry it with us all the time. Headstall, yeah.
Would you say that your hands or your legs are better when handling a horse? Do you feel like you're more naturally talented with one than the other?
Well, I'm not naturally talented with either. I have to work at both of them. I don't use my legs that much, and I don't use my hands that much. So, unless I have to. So, um, one of the things I work on constantly is how not to use technique. And so, including the reins, including leg and that kind of thing. So, so I would say I'm not really naturally talented at it. I just work really hard at both.
Cold showers or cold food forever?
I would say probably cold food. I can deal with that better than I can cold showers. I've worked in ranches in the wintertime. You get pretty cold. And
Hot shower might be the best part of your whole day.
and that's for sure. The last thing I want when I come in when I'm cold is a cold shower. I can deal with cold food. I just let it sit in the sun then it's warm.
Left lead or right lead? Do you have one that is more natural for you and one you have to be more intentional about, or
Depends on the horse and what's going on with them. Physical issues can feed into that. So
but I mean, like most people would be right-handed or left-handed, right leg or left leg, and they kind of would have a dominant side. And I know we would work our whole life to balancing that out where we no longer have a noticeable dominant side. Do you feel like you've conquered that, or do you have one that is you have to put a little more thought behind?
boy, in martial arts, you have to work both sides of your body. And so, um, if anything, I'm right-handed, but if anything, I'm maybe a little bit more left-handed dominant. But, um, but I feel like I'm pretty balanced side to side at this point.
What is the best smell in the barn?
Depends on the time of year. Wintertime, it can be just the smell of um, the manure on the floor and that kind of thing. And um, in the summertime, it's the hay for me. So
I'm sensing a little pattern here. You seem to be drawn to things that are warm. And I also know that you're a palm leaf hat guy, and there's not that many of us out there. I wear a palm leaf hat most of the time too. So in your heart of hearts, are you actually dreaming about being Jimmy Buffett on a Caribbean island somewhere while you're doing all of this stuff, warm sunshine and waves and fish, or no?
I am not a water guy, so no. But the thing is that I ended up with heat stroke a few years ago, well, a long time ago now, 15 years maybe, and up in New Hampshire of all places in the
Hmm.
summertime. And that has thrown off my internal thermostat. So if I in a hot, humid place, I can get pretty sick if I'm not careful these days. And in the wintertime, I can get really cold uh, really fast. Sometimes even when I'm really hot, I'll get cold. So my internal thermostat doesn't work the way it should anymore, and so I just have to be really careful. So I would much rather be warm than cold.
Sweet, salty, or spicy?
Spicy.
All right. I didn't see that coming. So are you more of a Mexican food chilies kind of a guy, or what kind of spicy do you like there?
Yeah, Mexican, Indian, yeah,
Okay.
Thai.
All right. What is your favorite dinosaur or deep sea creature?
Favorite dinosaur or deep sea creature? Deep sea. I like the little fish with the headlight. That's pretty
Hmm.
cool. I don't know what that's called, but
A lanternfish, I
yeah,
believe. Yes, sir. They're deep, deep, deep down there too.
yeah, that's pretty cool. Nature came up with that idea instead of just making it blind.
Uh-huh. Yeah, there's no telling the things that are down there we haven't discovered yet,
I
for
know.
sure. Have you ever had a UFO encounter?
UFO. Um, no, I don't think so.
Okay, well, that concludes our lightning round questions. I'm going to tabulate your score here real quick. Uh, I've got you at 4,673 points,
Awesome.
Mark Rashid, which
Awesome.
makes you the all-time high scorer for
Wow.
this game. So congratulations on that. And that entitles you to either an awkward silence or a genuine compliment, your choice.
Whew, how about an awkward silence?
Is the right choice every single time. Absolutely. I love it. Well, well, Mark, you are quite well known, of course, but would you give us the 30,000-foot view of what it is you do in the horse business?
Mostly I just work on trying to get along with them. That's been my goal from the get-go. Um, and really that's what it is. Eh, I would be doing that if I was just on the ranch by myself or doing what I'm doing now. In fact, that's what I was doing I was a rancher um, before I'm doing what I'm doing now. So, and I'm only doing what I'm doing now because circumstances created it. So,
So, within that vein, would you consider yourself a horseman who happens to teach or a teacher who happens to be a horseman?
God, I would say it's probably the latter now. Um, er, Earlier on, I would say it was the former.
Well, life's supposed to kind of change and evolve and be interesting, right? So
You would
that
hope
makes
so.
sense. Yeah. Because not to take away from your horseman, Krebs, but you are, to my mind, you are a teacher, kind of first and foremost. You have that heart and everything. I mean, we were just talking audio visual questions that I had for you before the deal. So you're that kind of guy that any knowledge you have, you're happy to share and help other people with. And I would definitely say that's what the heart of a teacher should be, anyway. So not
Yeah.
not not everybody is as helpful as you are with that sort of stuff, or as sincere. So since you are kind of, when I think of you, probably the one word that encapsulates what I think of when I think of Mark Rashid is softness. So would you tell us what the word softness means from your point of view?
Um, Softness is, when it comes to working with horses, it's trying to help the horse and the rider both do whatever it is that we're asking them to do. So if we're asking the horse to do something, I would like them to be able to do it using the least amount of muscle. Whatever, I only want them to use the muscle they need to use in order to do the thing we're asking them to do. And same thing with people. We have a tendency to use a lot of muscle when we're working with horses, which causes the horse to use a lot of muscle, and very inefficient way for both of us to move. So for me, softness it's the external part, but it comes from the internal part. Softness to me starts on the inside and then permeates out instead of the other way around. We talk about soft hands all the time, but if your hands are soft and everything behind it is as tight as Dick's hat band, then it doesn't really matter much, in my opinion. So,
And so I think that segues good into this. You talk a lot about using your energy and controlling your energy and controlling the horse's energy. So what does, that's a pretty abstract term, or at least in my mind. Maybe it means something a lot more specific to you. So how would you, I was talking about thoughts and feelings. Energy is one of those things that I can use and I can feel, but I have no real good way to describe it at this point. So give me the cheat code so I can plagiarize you for the rest of my career. How would you talk about energy?
well, we're all energy. Everything is energy. That cup you just drank out of is energy. It's just moving at different frequencies. Everything is moving at different frequencies. We're energy, the horse is energy. It's not really about controlling, it's about directing in my view. So what I feel like I'm trying to do with myself is I'm trying to not control energy, but direct the energy in myself, and also direct the energy of the horse. So the energy can be what's happening internally. It can also be what's happening externally. So the goal would be to get those two things to match up in some kind of way. What's happening having what's happening on the inside match what's going on the outside. We're really good as humans. We're really good at feeling a certain way and then doing and acting a different way. But horses can't do that. The way that they feel is the way they're going to act. So for me, I'm looking to get those two things to come together and work in conjunction with each other. The external and the internal working together in the same. Another way to look at it. Here you go. So this is a glass of water half full or half empty, depending on how you look at it, right? Let's say this is an enclosed bottle, okay? And let's say this is enclosed, like a water bottle or whatever, okay? And then down the middle of this glass or water bottle is a divider, okay? And then at the bottom of the divider is a hole that allows the water to go back and forth through the chambers. Okay? We get that? So,
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so now, because this is enclosed, if you're holding the glass like this, we put a numerical thing on it. On the right side is the number 5, and on the left side is the number 5. Okay? Because it's even at this point. So that equals 10. So we have 5 on one side, 5 on the other. So on one side, it's my energy. And on the other side, it's the horse's energy. Okay? So the idea is what happens, let's say this is the horse side. The horse's energy goes from a 5 to a 6 to a 7. Okay? What normally happens is the horse's energy goes 5, 6, 7. We go 5, 6, 7. Well, now we're at 14. We're out of balance. Okay? So in this case, if the horse goes 5, 6, 7, you'll see what the water does. Right? So the water goes 5, 4, 3. Right? So we stay in balance. Now, that doesn't mean we don't direct. It just means our energy, if the horse's energy goes up, we need to find a way to come down until we are able to re-regulate it and balance it. If the horse's energy goes 5, 4, 3, right, then on our side, we may have to go up to a 7 to help things kind of come through. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So
would you equate any of that to the word leadership? Like responding to the horse in the way that the horse needs to keep everything and bring them back into balance? I would kind of say that sounds like a good leader to me. I know you don't use that word a lot, but so I'm trying to ruffle your feathers here, Mark.
Well, no, I mean, what it's about is coming together, I think. We're trying to find a way, the word harmony is thrown around a lot in the horse world. And the idea being that harmony is this place we go to where everything is just, it's great all the time. But that's not really harmony. Harmony are these ebbs and, the tides, and everything flows, and, so we can't, we don't get grass without rain, so harmony is, we get the rain one day, we get the sun the next day, that kind of thing. Our seasons fluctuate, that's harmony. And so, so for me, it's more about balance than it is about anything else, and somebody has to be the adult. So that's going to have to probably be me, because the horse is probably not going to be able to do that given the situation.
Yeah. I've kind of always looked at the relationship between a person and a horse as kind of parent-child, in that same vein. You're kind of being the parent, which, depending on your skills as a parent, you might have different results with your kids. Kind of the same with the horse, but you're not necessarily always there to be their friend. Sometimes you're there to do the hard but necessary thing that keeps things in balance, like the rain and the grass. It's not all pretty all the time, and I like that acknowledgement of the reality of it. I think sometimes people talk about it in too much of an idyllic sense.
Yeah.
And the reality of it gets washed away. So people think if anything goes wrong ever, like they've made a horrible mistake, and they don't acknowledge that things going wrong is a natural, normal part of the whole process. It's necessary. It's not
necessary, and it really has. Those are the things that help, because otherwise we will never learn how to recalibrate, and offer something a little different to get to a different solution. So, having the wheels come off from time to time is not a bad thing, and the whole point of all of that for me, again, is is for us to be able to remain in a calm state. So you may have to, so for me, the idea is, it's not about how much pressure you use, it's what's behind that. So, I may have to, being as soft as you can be may not be as soft as you want to be. As soft as I want to be just a thought and have the horse do it. As soft as I can be maybe everything I got today. But if there's softness behind that, if it's not out of emotion, it's not emotion driven, and you can keep your wits about you and you can just work through it without blaming the horse, without getting all upset about this, that, or the other, your outcome, you're going to be able to feel when that horse decides that, okay, I need to try something different. And they do, and then you can feel it. And those times that horse generally isn't going to give you something really big when they're in that state. It's going to be really small. And if you're in a calm state while that's all going on, you're going to feel that little effort on the horse's part. And when you feel it, then they feel you feeling them. And then that starts the progression in the direction you want it to go.
I could not agree more. That's very well spoken. One of the things I wanted to jump into here is kind of getting into some of the discomfort of the horse, and I'm going to start that off by mentioning the Mark and Jim show. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what the Mark and Jim show is and how the bodywork side of things kind of came into your world?
Well, I call it the Jim and Mark show.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So Jim and I are constantly in sort of in a race for second place. So
Well said. Yes, sir.
so I actually started understanding body work years and years ago, and many, many years ago. Probably at this point now, it's over 30. When I started to work with a chiropractor, an equine chiropractor, who at the time was just starting out, and but he was really talented, still is. He lives in England now, but the two of us traveled together. I learned a ton from him, and at this point now, he is in the Animal Chiropractic Hall of Fame, and I'm doing this. So, but anyway, he was very instrumental in helping me understand biomechanics, just in general. I had no understanding of it really at all before then, and I worked with him for quite a while until probably about 2006. And then he ended up marrying a gal from England and went up to England. And but so it's always been for me, as long as I've been working, even so he even came and worked when I was still ranching. He would come up and work on the horses up there. And that was back in the, late 80s, 90s, early 90s. So that's been on my radar for a long time, the body work aspect of it. When Jim and I started working together, that was maybe 10 years ago. And that happened because somebody gave us one of Jim's books. And then Chrissy started working on the horses using the book, our horses. And then it turned out that Jim and I were both working at the Minnesota Horse Fair or something, whatever it was. But we were both there at the same time. And turned out that we wanted to meet him and he wanted to meet us. And so one morning we just went over to his booth and he said he was actually just on his way over to come and meet us to our booth, And so I took a 7-day course from him. Both Chrissy and I did. And he was asking me if I wanted to be certified in it. And that would have been just too much for me to do. But Chrissy went on and got certified. But the physical aspect is way more important than the training, I think, because if the physical isn't working, you can force a horse to do anything, it isn't going to fix it. if a horse is really troubled by something because it's physical. I can't begin to tell you how many people have been into our clinics where I have, because of my background with Dave and Dave Siemens is the chiropractor's name, and with Dave and now Jim and some others as well. I knew that the horses I was looking at were not okay physically, and so I would end up giving the people their money back and just telling them to go use that money to help the horse physically. And so I ended up over the years, I can't tell you how much money I've lost turning horses away. But it's nice now because Chrissy can do the work. A lot of times I'm working with Jim and he can do body work. I was doing the body work, and so instead of giving somebody a lesson necessarily in a clinic, I would end up doing body work on the horse. And so I mean, to me, it's maybe along with teeth, feet as well. But if you don't get the teeth right and you don't get the body working right, the training doesn't matter. Training is the last thing we look at. We look at everything else first.
So what sort of stuff, like I've actually seen exactly what you're talking about, but in your clinics and when y'all do the Mark and Jen show, you're working with people one-on-one. So it's kind of a series of hour lessons throughout the course of
Jim and Mark.
Jim and Mark. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'll try not to make that mistake again.
Yeah, let's get with it here, Daniel.
I need another cup of coffee. Sorry.
Yeah.
So when you have them there, that's a pretty good resource. But like, what specific things are you looking for to determine this is a no-go? I mean, like you could have a horse that's obviously lame on one particular leg or something, but I'm guessing you're often telling them that they have something a lot more subtle because they're not aware of it. So what kind of things do you commonly see that would be a full stop? You need to get this taken care of kind of stuff. Are there any patterns out there you're commonly seeing issues here? Or
There's quite a few actually, but the most common ones are lack of movement in the back end. And of course, then I ask questions too. So if, I usually will watch a horse while I'm finishing up one session and I see the other rider either come in to the arena or come up to the arena. I will be watching that horse move. And so my eye is always drawn to things that aren't moving. Not because I'm looking for it, but that's just how it's just, when a horse is moving symmetrically, it looks, or more or less symmetrically, it should look a certain way. And when that doesn't happen, when you don't see that symmetrical movement, it doesn't take long to figure out where the horse isn't moving, where the lack of movement or the restriction is. And so for me, that's the first thing I look for. And then if it looks really bad, before the rider gets on the horse, I will start asking them questions about it. For instance, I might ask them, does this horse go downhill okay? Well, no, they rush downhill, or they try to traverse the hill or whatever. Those are signs that you've probably got a lower back, or something's going on lower back and then back, through the hips or hocks or whatever. Just looking at the way the horse's hips move can determine whether you've got stiffness or soreness or something going on in the back end. It's all about symmetry, so if the horse's hips, they should move like this when a horse moves. And if they're moving, so if this hip drops 2 inches, then this hip should rise 2 inches. And so if this hip drops 2 inches and this hip rises 2 inches, and then this hip goes back to neutral and this hip stays up. So if you got this instead of this, that's a problem. Something's stuck somewhere. Usually from the lower back forward, but it could also be something in the barrel that isn't moving, because the feet can't get underneath the barrel. The barrel isn't, in order for the horse's feet to move, the barrel has to get out of the way of the feet that are going under the barrel. And so if the barrel isn't swinging out of the way of the feet that are going underneath it, you're probably going to have an impulsion problem because the horse can't get its feet underneath its body to push it to grab and then push off. So if the barrel isn't moving, if the barrel is only it should swing like this, but if it's going like this, those are horses that usually you've got a lead problem, you've got impulsion problems. Those are the horses that people will call lazy a lot of times. And it has nothing to do with them being lazy. Very few horses that I've ever seen are. But it's usually a physical issue of some kind. So those are things that I look at, just a couple, without going into a whole bunch of detail.
I understand clinic settings can be brief and you may not have a history, but like, do you rarely or typically attempt to help work the horse through that or get this moving and so forth, or it would depend on the severity, or sometimes motion is lotion and rest is not going to fix those problems necessarily. We need to get the horse moving properly. Do you handle that kind of thing at a clinic, or generally this is not the time and place?
It depends. If the horses with horses that are really they're because what happens is it causes a safety issue. What I mean by that is that the horse doesn't feel safe. So they know they're compromised. And then you got this horse that is compromised physically, and then you bring him into this new venue, this new place that they maybe have never been to. That adds to the anxiety. And so it's kind of one thing on top of another on top of another. The rider is nervous. And because the rider's nervous, then the horse is going to be, so it's this thing that just kind of spirals out of control. So for me, usually in a case like that, I might say, could we just watch him go around? Can we just lunge him a little bit to take a look and see how he's going? And, in the walk and trot. Sometimes little lamenesses will show up. The restrictions turn into lameness. The faster you go, oh yeah, then the rider will say, yeah, but they normally warm up out of that. Okay, but does that occur every time you ride? Well, yeah, it happens all the time, and they're usually off. It's kind of, and I've had even people say, well, he just pretends like he's lame so he can get out of work. That's not how horses operate. Either if they're limping, it's probably a problem. The amount of time it would take to teach a horse how to limp on cue is, that would be, you'd be spending a bunch of time on that. You would have to really work at it. So, so sometimes we might take a look at it and see if it clears up to the point where we can actually get some work done. And we don't turn away all horses that aren't sound necessarily that way. We will work within what they can do. Like you said, it's better to move than not move. Not moving is rigor mortis. So you want to be able to get some movement there. It's better to, if we can do something in the walk and the horse isn't too troubled, yeah, sure, let's do that. Can we work on the stop? How's the stop work? Are they backing up okay? Is there something there we can look at? How is your turn on the haunches and your turn on the forehand and your side pass, that kind of thing. So if it's stuff that we can do without, overdoing it physically for the horse, then maybe we do that. So it's all on a individual basis.
I like it. That's the only way you can roll really and make a good decision, I think. Would you say that, because I've watched you work, and one of the things I really liked about what you did is you were working with one particular lady and the horse was kind of busy and her hands were a little stagnant and she wasn't helping him, and you walked up and took her hands in the reins and kind of showed her, like working her like a puppet, of how you wanted her to do this and at this speed, and this is the tension you should feel, and kind of brought her into a much better place using her hands there, and the horse got a lot less bothered real quick. So do you kind of have a policy or a way that you look at it when you're doing clinics in terms of percentage of I'm going to work the horse or they're going to work the horse? I know when I started doing this, the biggest battle I had was fighting the urge to take over for the person and fix their problem for them, because it was hard to watch them kind of flounder around and learn how to swim, when I could just step in and fix it. So how do you go about finding that particular balance of I need to take over, or I'm going to work the horse, or I'm not touching this horse at all, you're going to have to do all of this? Do you have a rule of thumb you go by there? Or
Well, I don't ride anybody's horse unless I absolutely have to, which I haven't had to do in probably now it's been about 5 years. So I don't ride anybody's horse for them. And I stopped doing that about 30 years ago. I found that at the beginning I was riding everybody's horse, and we would kind of get through things, give the rider back to the horse or vice versa. The clinic would go well, and then a month or two later, then the wheels would come off, and the rider couldn't put the wheels back on because I had done it and they hadn't gone through it. So once I stopped doing that, we found that we were having a lot more success with things staying. In general, I will work from the ground with the rider on the horse's back, like you saw, when a horse is really bracy or has a big push going on in the bit. And I will do that first. And sometimes that can take a few minutes, and sometimes it can take a little longer. But just to get the idea, the thing is that most riders that we deal with don't know that their horse is bracy. It's just how things have always gone. And so they, the horse stops, kind of, unless it's really worried and they can't get him stopped, then it's a problem. So what we try to do is show them the difference between a horse that is softer, not necessarily soft, but softer than it was. And then we help them with their hands to show them what a brace is in them and how to soften that brace. And then we put the two of them together. And I think that's probably what you saw. And that I have found has had a lot, we've had a lot of success with that over the years. While I may be doing it initially, I don't finish it. In fact, I don't soften the horse. We get it softer, and then we help the rider understand softness in them and in their hands. And then we put the two together, and then they finish the process.
So one thing I would like to talk with you about is kind of just the general timeline of that. And where I'm coming at from this, I seem to be coming across a lot of people lately that have gotten a horse that had some problems, and then they decide that horse needs 3 years off or something to decompress, rather than kind of diving in and getting to work on the problems. And I could see like a horse came off the racetrack or something, I certainly could see kicking them out to pasture and letting them be a horse for a couple of months. But I don't think a 3-year period was necessarily beneficial there. I think working with the horse through it would be. And so what I'm trying to get to here is, do people have to wait for softness, or is that something that they can kind of start on and see some progress right away? Does it require a 3-year vacuum before you get started on it, or can you affect it in the next 20 minutes if you just got to working on it?
Well, that's a question that we have to look at. I think we have to look at the bigger picture. So, we don't raise any horses anymore. We used to raise our own and start our own colts and do all that other stuff, but we don't do that anymore. So when we need a horse, we go out and buy one. And usually they're ranch horses that, have got a little age on them. Most ranches out here, once they get up around 7, 8 years old, they sell them and bring along the new, the colts. And so the majority of horses that we buy are ranch horses um, that have physical issues, that don't really understand how to do the job that they've been doing since they were two, probably. And we deal a lot with horses. Almost 90% of the horses that we deal with are horses that don't really understand the job that they're doing. They're doing the job, but they don't understand it. And so it's a lot about, for us, the very first things we do is, like we talked earlier, is we get the physical stuff taken care of. We get the dentistry taken care of, feet, if we need to take care of the feet, the body work, we get all of that done first. And that can take anywhere from a few weeks to a few months, depending on how that all goes. And then we will start working with them and just kind of seeing what they understand and what they don't understand. And I usually do that while I'm teaching a clinic. But even with that, I mean, so let's say it takes 2 months to get a horse just feeling better physically. Then instead of getting on and riding them in a clinic, I'll saddle them up and put a bridle on them, usually, sometimes just a halter. And I will clinic with them just following me around. So without me getting on them. And I may do that for a day. I may do it for a week. I may do it for a couple of weeks, before I feel like they kind of got the idea of what's happening here. Then I get on, and then I do everything at a walk. So I'll give you an example. We don't do this all the time, but one of the best horses we've ever had, I got him when he was 7, and I got him in December. And I started riding him in January. And I rode him from January to May in the walk. And then we got another horse in, and I started riding that horse, and Chrissy started riding the other horse. Rocky is his name. And she rode him in the walk from May until September. And then we started trotting him. And then we started cantering him the following March. And once that happened, everything was in place exactly the way we wanted it. And he was that way for the rest of his life. So for me, I would rather take the time and not rush through things, especially if the horse doesn't understand it to begin with. I would rather take the time. I want to get to know this horse. I want to know who this horse is and how they operate and how they feel about certain things, and really get to understand them. And I'm just talking about my own personal horses. Mm-hmm. And then from there, see how fast the horse can go or how slow we need to go. And he'll tell us that. And for me, it's been, that kind of thing has been a game changer for me. Just being able to slow down. And that's been going on now for about 20 years. That's kind of how we do things. But you really get to know who the horse is instead of just, this needs to get done, now. We need to get the softness going now, today. People come to clinics and we can do that, and it can enhance their relationship. By that time, these people usually have had the horse from anywhere from 6 months to, 10, 15 years. So, but I'm talking about a horse that you don't know anything about, for us. So that's how I would answer that.
So let me ask you this. That seems to tie in a little bit with the question about feral versus spoiled. So what I'm gathering from that is that you're kind of having to fix problems that exist in the horse. Would that go the same way for you if you had a blank slate without problems and you got to set everything up from the beginning? Do you think the rate of change would be a faster rate of change if you didn't have to deal with baggage and they think they know the answer, but it's the wrong answer, and you have to untrain before you can train, kind of thing?
That's an interesting question because I never really look at it in terms of time. I look at it in terms of understanding. And so, we used to do a ton of work with Mustangs. I ran a training school back in the late 1980s, and all we used was Mustangs. In fact, Mustangs was pretty much all I worked with for about 5 years. And I mean, you learn a lot working with those horses. Some of them can come along really easy, and uh, the age of the horse, the older they are, the more difficult and more time consuming it can be. The younger they are, the easier it might go. Just like anything else, because you're also working with the horse's brain, So if you get, I used to always tell people, just whatever you do, don't get a Mustang over 5 years old, because my experience was that everything took way more time, and whereas if you got a 3-year-old, you might be riding them inside a year, for instance. With a 5-year-old, you might not be riding them for 3 years, depending on the horse. And working with Dr. Steve Peters, come to find out that about 5, 6 years old, the horse's brain becomes much less malleable. So they can still take in information, obviously, but the neural pathways start to slow down the structure. So I didn't know that. I just knew that the older you got, the more trouble it could be, the longer it could take. So anyway, again, it's about learning the horse and what you got working for you, what works for them and what doesn't work for them, and how can we get around these things so that you feel better about them and that kind of thing. And so the slower you go, this has been my experience, the more you learn about the horse as an individual. And so that's just, if there's anything that I've learned in these many years, it's the slower you go, the faster things seem to work out. So.
Yes, sir. So it's my understanding that you were into horses before Aikido, and it was actually through a horse clinic that you found Aikido, or maybe Aikido found you. However you want to think about that. And then you started studying Aikido and Aibado came about. I don't know, maybe you want to tell the story of how you got there and what that is, and kind of how it all actually does make sense and flows with your process.
Yeah, so I was doing a clinic in Tennessee, and there was a guy there that was having a bunch of trouble with his horse, and he kept trying to push. It was a little Pasifino. He was trying to push this horse into doing this stuff, and he was just getting more and more frustrated. And I stopped him finally and said, "Listen, everything you want is here. This is just energy. You just need to direct the energy. But everything you're looking for is already here." And we don't get a lot of men in our clinics, and as I'm talking, it looked like I was losing him. He kind of got this blank expression on his face, and I said, you just need to get into that energy and blend with it, and then give it some direction. And he said, "I know it sounds like Zen horseback riding, but it's not. It's you can do this just by getting along with this horse instead of fighting him the way we're doing now." And like I said, I just felt like, man, I'm losing this guy. So I started talking faster, I didn't want to lose him. And finally I said everything I needed to say. And I said, "Do you understand what I'm saying?" And he said, "Yeah, I understand perfectly." And he went out and did it. And everything that I'd said, And his ride smoothed out. The horse felt better. He said it was the best that horse had gone in the whole time that he'd owned it. And so at the end of that session, he came up to me and he said, "Do you train in Aikido?" And I said, "No, I don't. Didn't know what it was." And he said, "Well, that's what you're doing." He said, "I'm an Aikido instructor, and I never really made the connection between the work that we do in the dojo and the work that I should be doing with my horse. I never made the connection until you mentioned it." And he said, "You should really, train in Aikido. That one of the top Aikido masters in the world is just in Boulder, which is 45 minutes from us." And it just happened that there was a really good instructor here in town that I started training with and still do. In fact, I'm training with him tonight. And I started training and I studied first, and then I did a lot of reading and watched a lot of videos and before I actually went into the dojo. So I understood the principles, I thought, and then started training. And then I started over time. It took about 6 months maybe, because I thought I had good balance until I started training and found out that my balance had shifted. While I started training, I had no balance almost. It was hard for me to even walk up and down stairs, because my balance was shifting, because I had to do what I was doing with my right hand. I also had to do with my left hand. What I did with my right side of my body, I had to do with the left side of my body. And, I had played basketball in the early days and, having to do things with both hands, but that had been a while. Anyway, long story short, I started seeing the benefits of what I was doing in the dojo as I was working with horses. And then I started to teach some of those little things in the clinics I was doing. And people started wanting more and more information. And at the same time, I was still training. And it was after I received my first degree, black belt, my first dan, that I, with my teacher, my instructor, and Chrissy, we started developing what is now called Aibado, which is Aikido for horsemen, with these principles and how it applies directly to horsemanship and the internal aspects of horsemanship, which I developed with the help of Aikido Sensei down in Boulder. So I did go down and train with Aikido Sensei as well, and have over the years. So anyway, that's how that all came about. And so much of what I do now has its foundation in that work. So
do you ever get a little rankled with Steven Seagal out there running around like a madman as a poster child, or no?
no, I don't care about him. I got better things to do.
Yeah, I can understand. I just had to throw that in there. I like how I'm a big believer in cross training, and a lot of times we will take two things that don't seem to be related, but one lesson learned and one will definitely apply to the other, just like you're talking about here. So to me, kind of like with horses, the only way to get comfortable and to think your way through being attacked is to be attacked and to kind of be in that situation enough times, and then you're not having that emotional overwhelming response, so you can start to control yourself, and I've been here, I can handle this, and execute your training and so forth. So when you are working with people, and I've watched you do this, so let me just say I really did appreciate being able to come there and catch the Jim and Mark show, because you are a very well-known clinician. I never did like apprentice under another clinician, so when I started doing that, I was kind of making it up as I went. So if there is a proper way to do it, I never had that structurally laid out for me that, here are your ducks and this is the row they need to be in. And so there's parts of that, like you had a lady there that wasn't very receptive to what you were teaching, and you were just kind of water on a duck's back. It didn't affect you at all, just rolled off, and she's not ready to hear this, and that's fine, and on to the next. And I appreciated watching that because it was nice to see that someone as accomplished as yourself still has some of the same fights that I have. And it's not a just me thing. Even when if I ever get to a status of a Mark Rashid, there's still going to be that to deal with out there too. But among the customer,
I would just say there that I don't look at it as a fight. It's somebody who maybe isn't ready to hear what I have to say, which is fine. It's not my job necessarily to change that. What we do isn't for everybody. So, and I understand that. So, if they're a rider and they've paid for the time, then they will get the time. If they're an auditor and they have questions, usually I look at that situation as they're trying to learn something. Something's bothering them about what they're seeing, or something's bothering them about what they understand, and what they're seeing doesn't match up with what they understand. And so they're having an internal struggle about it, and it comes out sounding like resistance when it may just be confusion. So for me, that's not I don't have to get out of my chair for something like that. I don't, I've got a long day ahead of me here, so I don't need to spend energy on this kind of thing, is how I look at it. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, and I may have prefaced that poorly. I didn't mean that you were in a fight, so to speak, just merely that you had enough experience at the thing that it didn't have to emotionally trouble you anymore. Just like someone attacking you, you know how to deal with it. Your blood pressure doesn't actually rise in this experience when it might have 10 years ago or something. But one of the things that I'm sure both are working with are customers that have either some fear issues toward their horse, or certainly some lack of confidence issues with their horse. So how do you deal with that when like I kind of view it, sometimes there's this gap. There's what the horse needs and there's what the person can provide, and we hope that the gap between the two isn't so wide that the person can't cover it, because sometimes it is. This lady just isn't ever going to handle this horse, and that's just kind of that, unfortunately. But other times, this person's going to have to step up a fair bit, but it is a step they can probably manage. And so when that person isn't capable at this time of having a mind like still water, how do you help them through that, where they can kind of contain themselves and handle the situation appropriately rather than peeing a little bit?
I generally will ask a lot of questions. What is it that you're looking for? What would you like to accomplish, over the next couple of days or whatever? And usually what will happen if I ask them what they're looking for is they will give me a laundry list of what they don't want. And so that kind of tells us kind of where their mindset is. So they've been conditioned only to look at the things that they don't want. And so therefore they're just getting more and more of what they don't want. And so the first thing I'm trying to do in a situation like that is get things turned around where we can have this discussion about, yeah, but what is it that you do? What are you looking for? What would you like this horse to do for you? Or what would you like to do together with this horse? And that in and of itself starts shifting things. Usually, in other cases, I mean, there's times where the fear is so bad that I just explain to him, I can't. This is above my pay grade. What you got going on here, and just for your own well-being, it would be better to go maybe talk to somebody about this, because this is an overwhelming fear, and maybe not just in the horsemanship part of it, but maybe in everything that they're in their whole life. Maybe those are far and few between, but they do happen. But what I try to do is see if we can't get things to shift, where the person starts to go, okay, so what do I want? I don't know what I want, you know? And once they start figuring out what they're looking for, then it's a lot easier for us to start moving forward. And then from there, how can we get some kind of success? So a little success that we can build on. You know, the majority of horsemanship is about looking for the things that are wrong or that you don't want, so you can fix them, instead of looking for the things you do want so you can build on them. And so my philosophy is, let's find out what you want, get a little bit of success. Sometimes it's really small, but we got it. Now we can build on it. And usually once people start seeing the success and seeing that their horse doesn't have it out in for them, and it takes just that little bit, once they get a little success, it doesn't take long before it starts building into bigger and bigger things in a positive way, over time. And if we have them for 3 days, a lot of times they're leaving with a different horse and rider than what they came in on the first day. But usually it's about asking questions for me, and not just asking questions. I got to hear the answer, and and is the answer that they're giving me makes sense to what they've got going on in the situation. I'll give you a really quick example. I don't want to belabor this point, but we had a rider in a clinic this past summer who was really stuck. I mean, super stuck. And I don't know that I've ever seen anybody that was, I shouldn't say anybody that was as stuck, but it was very close. And I was having a really hard time trying to figure out what was going on. And this is during one of our 10-day clinics. And it was Wednesday of the second week before I finally realized I am not listening to what she has to say. I need to stop talking and let her talk. And, because up until then, it was an exchange. I would say something, she would say something, I would say something. It was that kind of thing back and forth. Or I would say, God, it's not really what we're looking for. We're looking for this other thing. And I wasn't hearing what she was saying. And when I stopped talking on that Wednesday, she was able to actually explain the whole thing. That was the problem for her. And once I did that, so instead of me teaching, I just listened. I learned what the problem was. And from that point, so we had Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of the second week to work with. She was a completely different rider, completely different person. And the turnaround was amazing. She was a wonderful person to begin with. But the turnaround, and she was getting along so much better with the horse that she was working with. It was just amazing to see it. So it's not always about me fixing this thing. Sometimes they need to fix it themselves. And I just got to get out of the way.
So what would you say people pay you for, Mark? You just sit there and watch it? No, I'm kidding.
It's good work if you can get it.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. It's kind of like the sculptor. All you do is remove everything that isn't an elephant, and there you go. Now you've got an elephant sculpture.
There you go.
I would say one of the overarching themes that I see, the particular martial art that you chose, Aikido, is a mostly defensive martial art, and it is exactly the same thing about taking the other person's momentum, using it against them, redirection of deal. You're also into guitars, and obviously, if you're trying to fight a guitar, you're probably not going to have very beautiful music come out of the other end of the thing. So do you view yourself, I kind of had mentioned teacher earlier, but do you view yourself as an artist at all? And all of these things are sort of arts for you more than skills or science, I guess?
I look at almost everything as an art. So, I mean, including life. I just feel like it's all an art form to some degree or another, especially if you're going to try and do it well. You know, I mean, there's technique that you got to learn, but for me, I think at some point the goal is to transcend technique, and you know, and I just feel like I don't want to be reinventing the wheel. You know, if especially with horses, I want to we I think as horse people, we should be endeavoring to find ways to move the needle. You know, I mean, one of the reasons I don't watch a lot of horse people, other than the fact that I don't have the time, is that so much of it is just reinventing the wheel. You know, it's just different people doing the same stuff. And, you know, I want to see, you know, can you do that same thing that you're talking about? Can you do that? You know, you do that thing with the flag. Can you do it without the flag? Is there something, you know, can you do that without the flag? Can you do that thing you're doing without the spurs? You know, maybe you can't. I don't know. But, you know, I haven't worn spurs in over 30 years and I don't carry a flag. I've got one somewhere. I think it's in the trailer somewhere. But it's an old whip with a bag on the end of it, you know. So I don't discount those things, but I also don't rely on them, you know. So it goes back to the idea of, can we transcend technique, or are we stuck in a loop that we are relying on doing the same things over and over and over, and we're not thinking outside of what I already know. And the thing is, too, a lot of people in the horse world, you know, they're if they're instructors, they're teaching the way they were taught. They're teaching what they were taught the way they were taught it. And so it just perpetuates this stuff over and over and over. And I just feel like, you know, if we want to get better, if we want to have better horses and we want to have better horsemanship, we have to get past some of this stuff. And, you know, for me, it was looking outside of horsemanship. I was not seeing anywhere the thing that I was looking for to improve my horsemanship in the horse world. So I had to get outside of it in order to look at things differently from a philosophical and from a physical aspect.
So would you say Aikido was that thing when you found that it sort of opened a whole new box for you to mess around in?
Yes. And it wasn't just the art itself. It wasn't just Aikido, but it was also the instructors. The instructors, while they were working within a framework, could also work outside of that framework. And they were just, I've just been really lucky in that I've been able to work with some of the top Aikido masters in the world. And across the board, they are some of the best people that I've ever met. Kind, you know, their humanity comes through in everything they do, the way they talk with people, the way they teach, how they move through the world. And those are the things that I'm looking for. How do I get better at those things in my life, not just in horsemanship or in the martial art to begin with? It's just, how do I get better at those things in my life? And it's not just emulating it, it's about doing it. it's about feeling it and being part of it and having it be part of you.
That seems like it brings us pretty neatly to the topic of passive leadership. So I think you've been kind of describing it without that word for a good bit of this conversation. But what does passive leadership mean to you?
Well, passive leadership, I talked about in my book, Horses Never Lie. And at the time, I was going to be doing giving a talk in Oregon, Bend, Oregon. And I didn't have a subject. And this thing had been kicking around in my head for a long time, but I had to have a title. And so I came up with that title, Passive Leadership, which basically describes how horses operate in the wild. And I talk about it in different terms now than I did then. But the idea is that, and we'll talk about this real quick, but a lot of horsemanship these days it claims to be based on how horses interact with each other. And that's not accurate. So there are two different herd dynamics. One of them is what happens in the wild, so feral horses, wild horses. And the other one is what happens in domestic horses, domestic herds. So in feral herds, there is very seldom is there ever any chasing, is there ever any pushing around, for a couple of reasons. One of them is that there's plenty of resources in the wild in general. So there's plenty of water, there's plenty of feed to go around. Usually the bands are relatively small, maybe 9 horses. It's made up of, maybe 8 mares and a stallion. And the only time that there's a lot of kerfuffle generally is during breeding season. So, and that's usually just stallions. And, and mares get chased by the stallions to keep them away from the other stallions, that kind of thing. But in general, that doesn't happen. I've been really, really lucky in that I've been able to observe wild horses all over the West, North and South Dakota, Wyoming, Montana, here in Colorado, Oregon. When I went to do that talk, there were wild horses there. And Washington, California, Nevada, Utah, Idaho, and over in England, on the moors in England and the New Forest in England. And across the board, the dynamics of the herds of these wild feral horses is the same. It's very, very quiet. There's very little chasing, there's just none of that. And the reason being because if they're doing a bunch of that chasing around all day long, they aren't going to have any energy for when the lion comes out at the end of the day, and they'd be extinct by now. So that's a completely different deal than what's happening in domestic herds where you have to feed them every day. Now you're talking, procreation is the main motivator in wild horses, and food is the main motivator in domestic horses. Completely changes the dynamic. So now they're fighting over resources. And so the idea that all of these training deals is based on chasing your horse around, being the alpha horse and all of that. And it's just it is not how it works. The horse that chases all the other horses around is the horse that nobody in the herd wants to be around because they're so unpredictable. And that you don't see that in wild horses. You just don't see it. So, um, so that kind of the idea of passive leadership is more about is about so in a herd of wild horses, the leader generally is an older mare. And it's an older mare because mares generally will stay with the same band for life. Not always, but generally. And it's going to be the old mare that knows where all the good grazing spots are. That's going to know where the water is. There was a study that was done years ago where I think it was a 25-year study where they were following these horses in Nevada, and it was a drought. The first year that study was done, and this mare took these horses to this watering hole way out in the middle of nowhere so that they could drink, and then they would come back and they would graze for 2, 3 days, and then they'd go all the way back to the watering hole, fill up on water, and come back. And the drought broke, everything was fine. 25 years later, the baby that was with the mare was a mare, so that now this baby is close to 25 years old or whatever it was, 24. That baby, another drought hits, that baby takes everybody back to that same watering hole that she'd only been to once. So that's the kind of leadership that we're talking about. And it's passed down. So the idea that we have to chase these horses around, that we have to get their respect by being the alpha is just, it's a ridiculous concept, unfortunately. And because it allows people some success, that they're actually feel like they're getting something done with their horse, people buy into it. And now you've got a bunch of people pushing horses around when it's not necessary. So went the long way around the barn to answer that one, but
No, that's fine. So do you believe that dominance isn't a factor at play with our relationship with horses at all?
it doesn't have to be,
Okay. Um,
So in a wild herd, let's say there's 9 horses, not including the stallion. So let's say there's 9 mares in the herd. This is generally how it works. Generally, out of those 9 mares, you're going to have the top 3. Okay. Those top 3 mares were born into that hierarchy. Their babies will be born into that hierarchy. They were born into it. Their mothers were born into it, and on and on. Okay. The bottom 3, same thing. They were born into the lower hierarchy, let's say. Okay. Those mares generally are going to be the ones that are bred by satellite stallions during breeding season while the other stallion is fighting off, generally speaking. The 3 in the middle usually are mares that have been absorbed into the herd for one reason or another. So this is just a general explanation. I'm not saying that this is exact how it works, but in general, this is how it works. And so because these mares are born into this hierarchy, more or less, there isn't a lot of fighting, and that's how nature designed it, because you fight all day long, you're going to have a problem when the predators come out. The fighting, if there's going to be any, is going to be in those middle 3. And even then, if it gets out of hand, the stallion steps in and breaks it up. So you just don't want to bring a lot of attention to the herd ever. So that's why it's so quiet. So I just wanted to point that out, that it's that part of it, having the dominance part of it doesn't need to happen. It's about direction. It's about giving direction more than it is about dominating, in my opinion.
so let me share this with you. I'll be curious as to your thoughts. To me, the way that I would sort out dominance, and I know you didn't say this here, but I have heard you say it at other times, so I'm going to bring it in. Like what we would see as the alpha mare may be the more obviously aggressive horse, but that isn't necessarily the actual leader of the herd. There often would be a quieter type of a horse that would be the one that they would follow to the water hole. So just for simplicity's sake, the way I would look at dominance is basically the horse that has the capability of moving the other horse's feet. And there could be a variety of motivations behind that. Like it could be fluid. If you have a mare with a foal on her and she may be that middle of the pack mare, but when she's got the foal and she's uber protective, if another horse encroaches and threatens the foal, she's going to be more aggressive in that instance than she would have been, or defensively aggressive than she would have been without the foal. The stallion could, during breeding season, everybody's in heat. He's going to be way more active and higher energy than he is in December or something like that. So to my mind, even I see dominance even in the more passive things, like for example, even the purest positive reinforcement trainers, to me, they are still using tools and tricks to manipulate in order to ultimately control the horse's feet. And so I still see that as an act of dominance. It's just not dominance with a whip. It is still dominance and control of the horse's feet, just through a different modality. That's kind of how I look at it. I think when we hear the word dominance, there's a connotation to it that I don't think lives up to the reality of what the word actually means, I guess. So what would you have to say about that?
I would start by saying it's not about moving the horse's feet. It's about the mind, changing what the mind is doing so that the body can do something different.
So how about if we worded it as ability to affect?
Yeah.
Mentally, physically, I can exert influence on you in some manner.
Yeah, I mean, but that happens across the board with everybody. At some point, we are going to be doing that with people we know and we're doing it without really even, it's not even crossing our mind that that's happening. That, we could be walking side by side with somebody and we veer off just a little bit and that other person follows us because we're in conversation. It's not about, nobody was dominated there, but in the general use of the word, but there was an effect that happened there. And we're in a conversation and, and now we do an exercise in the dojo where we talk about, we use sticks for this, where we attach people to each other with sticks. And the idea there is if you feel pressure, where we put a stick from one belly to another belly on a person. And the idea is if you feel an opening, you move into it. And if you feel pressure, you move away from it. Right? And so there is no leader or follower necessarily. You're just responding to whether you're feeling what you're feeling is kind of the idea there. So what's happening at an emotional level, if you want to call it that, is you're responding to what you're feeling. Even though, so in a case like that, where things are more or less neutral, there's a subtle opening. Okay, can I move into that subtle opening without putting more pressure on my partner? And they feel a little bit of pressure and they move away from it. And then at some point that shifts in some kind of way or whatever. Right. And so that's kind of what I'm looking to try and emulate with horses, more or less. I mean, pressure is all we have to work with. And so it's like we were talking about earlier. Some days it might be you just think about something and the horse does it. And other days you may have to use way more pressure than you want to use. So that's kind of the idea for me there. I would say with the positive reinforcement thing is what we're looking. So I, from my understanding, what we're trying to do with horses when we're working with them is give them what's called an internal locus of control. And what that is that the horse feels as if they are part of what's going on. And they actually have some control over what's going on. Okay. So it's an internal thing that's happening. And there's a certain function in the brain that happens when they feel like they have an internal locus of control. In positive reinforcement kind of thing, that is an external locus of control. The thing that they have to do something in order to get something, in this case, a food, a treat of some kind. That's an external locus of control, and that works on a completely different process in the brain. And in what you'll find, so the strongest motivators in prey animals, so horses, cats, or horses, cattle, elk, whatever, prey animals, is fear, pain, and food. Those are the three strongest motivators in that order. In predators, the three strongest motivators are food, fear, and pain. Okay, which is why, a coyote in a trap will chew its leg off to get away. The fear is overriding the pain, and so they've got to get away, right? So that's why with positive reinforcement will not work when a horse is stressed, is really worried. Whereas where you can give a horse direction in some kind of way, and that can actually allow them to re-engage themselves and ultimately come back. So those are the differences between, say, positive reinforcement and allowing the work with the horse and allowing them to have an internal locus of control in what's going on.
Do you think of things in terms of like the autonomic nervous system? So like I'll give you an example. This was the first time I heard it when you were talking, was when we were talking earlier about how to deal with a customer that has fear or confidence issues, and you said what you do is ask them a lot of questions. And you didn't use these are my words, but to me, what you're doing in that scenario is you're taking a person who's in that sympathetic nervous system. They're having stress, just thinking about, I'm about to step on this horse and things are going to go bad. And, they have a whole negative side to everything that they're thinking, and they're having emotional responses. And by asking them questions, you're causing them to have to think. And the net result of that is you pulled them out of the sympathetic nervous system back into the parasympathetic nervous system. And now they're under control and they're not in that emotional spot. So now they can handle things. So to me, that's the underlying thing I heard when you were saying that. I would also say that I see a thread of dominance in there, or dominance is the wrong word, but I think that works because of the hierarchy that is established. They have paid you, they know you by reputation, or they worked with you before. So there's an amount of trust that they have with you. And so they're going to more easily allow you to lead them places where if, the stall boy came out to lead that clinic, they may not take in or give him the opportunity to say anything. So I guess that's where I'm kind of coming at, is that I still see dominance in a lot of these places because there is that influence being exerted. And to me, the more passive leadership is just you are able to exert the leadership because you have a more compliant or willing participant. Where if you have a less willing participant, then you're either going to have to cut bait or be a more active. Am I totally off base here, or does any of that resonate with you?
Yeah, you use two different terms there. You use
Okay.
dominance and then you use leadership.
Okay.
right? And
Yes, sir.
so what I see in the clinics is that that we do. I see it as more of a, people are coming to learn, so I look at it as more of a teaching, learning kind of thing. So to me, that would be a leadership role more than me trying to 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 dominate. And the reason I'm kind of hesitant to use that word is because words have power. And when we're using certain words, that word can come with a feel. And so one of the things we do in the Aibado classes is we teach people the difference. They can feel the difference between the two words make and help. There's a there's a difference in the feel between those two words, and we show people how to distinguish between the two. Um, but people use those words oftentimes interchangeably, make and help, but they are not. And you can feel the difference between the two, and it's a substantial difference when you feel it. And so I don't ever use the word make. I'd almost never use it unless I'm saying I'm going to make the bed or whatever, right? But other than that, I almost never use that word. And I don't use the word dominance for the same reason, because that has a different feel. That has an adversarial feel to it. And so whether we mean it that way or we don't, same thing with make and help. Whether we don't mean it to sound, because making is by definition, making, you're going to make somebody do something, that's an adversarial thing. They don't want to do it, and
Involves
you're going to,
force of some kind. Yes, sir.
yeah. Same thing with dominance, the word dominance. So those two words are two words that I don't use very often. Whether we mean it to, whether we mean, this is me, I'm not saying you.
Sure.
So whether we try to explain the word away because we want to use the word, and we're trying to have it fit in our mind to be okay to use that word, or or but again, it has a certain feel. If dominating somebody and helping somebody or directing somebody or um, leading somebody, those, if you think about those words and the feel of them, each individual word, they all have a different feel to them. And so those are just things I'm not saying anybody else has to do and say what I do. I'm just, those are things for me in my life, not just my horse work, but in my life. Those are things that I just don't, they don't feel good to me.
So this would be part of one of my personal battles is the separation of the feeling and meaning between certain words. Like we kind of have this cancel culture society, and a word that was perfectly fine for a long time all of a sudden is a bad word. It becomes a taboo of some kind. And I think dominance is one of those kinds of words. To me, when I think of dominance, I'm thinking it more clinically and analytically. To me, you can't have leadership or reverence, um, or any of those things without dominance being factored in. And so it's simply an indication of a hierarchy that exists. So in your life, the old man is someone you certainly in your books you've written about, and it's obvious you have a lot of respect and a lot of reverence for him. But there was also a very clear hierarchy of you as a 12-year-old kid and him as the old experienced horseman. And so I would say he was the dominant person in the relationship. But to me, it's not an infliction of any anything bad. It is just simply an orchestration that there's a hierarchy there. So another example I would have of that when you talk about the feelings of words, if I said the word dominance in Portuguese and you don't speak Portuguese, you wouldn't have a feeling toward it at all. The feeling is your own personal bias and baggage and experiences and whatever that may be, which to me is separate from the definition of what the word actually means. So that's part of my little thing, is just fighting for the preservation of some of these words that I think are relevant. And I don't think that they should have a black eye attached to them or anything like that, just because of kind of these feelings things. I think that word should be just like that mind of still water. It should not cause a ripple. It's just a word that has a meaning, and that's all that it means. I don't think you can separate it out of leadership or passive leadership. Or I think it's evident throughout all of those things, even though maybe not as obvious in some as in others. But that's just my take on it. Oh.
Well, that's the thing there that I would just add is that, and you kind of hit on it a little bit, but we're looking at that from our perspective. We're not looking at it from the person I'm working with, from their perspective. How is that going to land with them? That's always in the back of my mind. And even when I'm writing my books, almost every sentence, not every sentence, but pretty much, I mean, if I'm trying to make a point, I stop and I will think about people that I know around the world. And how do I phrase this in such a way to where it makes sense to them? Not just makes sense to me. I want it to make sense to you, and I want it to make sense to that little kid down the road, and I want it to make sense as much as I can to make sense to everybody. So I'm trying to think of the big picture rather than me just getting stuck on my thing. So I don't use those words because of the global feel that they have, not because it's a bad word. That's different. And in horsemanship, especially, it's been my experience. Those words have been used and overused to the point where it's like water on a duck's back. People don't even think about it, but they're doing things with their horses because of those words that are causing problems between them and their horse. And so that's I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it from a much broader picture than me liking the word or not liking the word. Mm-hmm. The word has no bearing really. It's just a sound that we make.
Yeah, arbitrary collection of letters, right?
Yeah, exactly. But people don't see it that way. Whether I see it that way or not doesn't matter to me. It might matter to me, but it matters more to me on how that person over there in their interaction with their horse is how that's gonna land with them. And if just eliminating it eliminates the issue, then that's what I'll do.
So what I really heard in that statement was, when you're writing a book, you're thinking of me. I think I'm going to take that little sound clip out of there, and that's going to play that'll be my entrance song whenever I'm walking into an arena. I'll have that playing behind me. Put some background music to it. I like it.
That's right. That's exactly right.
We're going to jump to our podcast sponsor for this episode, and I always search hard to match one with a guest. This one is maybe a little more generic, but our sponsor for this episode is Equibabble. Do you have a burning desire to know what your horse is really thinking? Are you concerned with their feelings on pasture mates, favorite treats, and why they hate that particular corner of the arena and more? Equibabble is here for you. Using the latest in aura and moodstone technology and integrating AI, our patented app will take you in your horse's astrological sign, biorhythms, and translate these feelings that need to be validated, thoughts, and experiences into any of 9 different languages. Just imagine riding along the trail and Captain Jack Sorrell asks you why you are so obviously concerned about the creek ahead, because we're just going to leap across it anyway, all via your smartphone. We've recently partnered with the cast of the hit show Cheers, and for an extra $9.99 a month, your surly chestnut mare's thoughts and feelings could be translated and voiced to you by Carla, played by Rhea Perlman. Got a sassy one that's more of a fit for Kirstie Alley? We can make it happen. Goofy geldings pair so perfectly with Woody Harrelson's voice that it's a no-brainer. Let Ted Danson be the voice of your stallion who's a prancing. That old boy that anyone can get along with and he'd never hurt you? Just call him Norm from now on. Have an analyzer who'll drone on forever? Let Kelsey Grammer add the affects to his dialects. Imagine the camaraderie you'll feel when you're heading back to your stall at the dressage show and you and your horse are both wondering if it's time to switch from mimosas to martinis. Haven't you ever wondered what your horse has named you? What if your horse could tell you the reason for his chronic but unfindable lameness is because you constantly lean inside over his shoulder on the right circles, and turns out he has to strain to accommodate your weight in the wrong place? You don't believe your trainer, but maybe you'll believe Mr. He's a Cool Ray in the voice of Cliff Clavin instead. Equibabble, because it's time the other side of the conversation was heard. A future version is being planned for mules as soon as we can get a bead on what in the hell mules might be thinking. All right, we have paid the bills there, so I feel a little better now.
Very good. I was thinking you should look into ear hobbles
Ear
as a
hobbles.
sponsor. Yeah.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, they help horses feel better.
Or at least get them where they can't tell you they're not, right?
That's right.
Well, why don't we get into music a little bit? So you were a luthier before a horse trainer. Is that correct?
No, I was working with horses when I was 13. I started working on guitars when I was in my early 20s.
Okay. So is that I looked up the word luthier is a woodworker who works on string instruments. So is it specific to guitars, or are you also into fiddles and all manner of things, or what?
Yeah, I've worked on fiddles. I've worked on stand-up bass guitars, or the stand-up bass, um, electric guitars, acoustic guitars, mandolins. Yeah, a little bit of everything.
Ukuleles, all of it.
Yeah, I've built ukuleles. I just sent one out to New Hampshire not about 2 months ago.
Just as an aside, have you ever heard of the Ukulele Orchestra of Great Britain?
There's a bunch of them. Yeah, there's a lot of them. There's a big one in Wisconsin. Yeah.
Well, they play a rendition of Inigo Montoya, or not Inigo Montoya, The Ecstasy of Gold on the Clint Eastwood.
Hmm.
They do that on the ukuleles, and it's awesome. I have to go watch that about every 6 months, whether I need to
Yeah.
or not.
Yeah.
So what drew you into the guitar world?
Well, I started out as a drummer, so I taught myself how to play drums first, and so I did that. I taught myself how to play drums, and then I got a job so I could buy some drums. So I had a buddy in high school that had had a set of drums. I bought those for $50 and um, learned how to play. I taught myself how to play. And about 3 months after that, a buddy of mine who also taught himself how to play bass just down the street from me, and I joined a band. The guy that was 27 years old, and so we were playing every weekend when I was 13. But drums are difficult to take to campfires. So I went and bought myself a guitar, and with the money that I was making playing drums, And basically, I taught myself how to play guitar by watching the guitar players in the bands that I played in. I still have that guitar, by the way. But anyway, I took that guitar in to have some work done on it. And it was just an adjustment on the bridge, basically, or on the saddle. And the guy charged me $50 to do it. And at the time, that was a lot of money. And it wasn't a big adjustment, I didn't think. And so I kind of complained to him and I said, "Man, that's a lot of money." He said, "Well, you don't like it. Next time do it yourself." And I said, "Well, don't think I won't." So I went to the library and picked out all the books I could on building guitars and guitar repair. And then I went around to all the garage sales and bought any guitars I could find, for a couple bucks. And I took them apart and put them back together. And then I started doing work for guitar players in the bands that I was playing in, just kind of on the side out of my house. And so that was at the beginning of the year. That would have been in February. And then by this time of year, in the same year, the guy called me, the guy that had done the repair on my guitar called me and asked if I wanted to buy his shop because I was taking all his business. And so I bought his shop, lock, stock, and barrel for I think it was $2,500. And so I was doing a lot of repairs, and then I started building guitars on my own there. And I did that for, I was doing horses. So I did that full time, and I was doing horses on the side. And then it got to a point where I just didn't want to do that. I wanted to do horses full time. And so that's what happened. So that went by the wayside, and then I went back to horses pretty much full time, and then just did that on the side. So
So is that I do a bit of woodworking myself, but I can imagine that would be something that's got some specialized tooling and equipment and all associated with it. Does it take a pretty big full shop to work on guitars, or is it less than I would think it would be?
I've got a pretty full shop. Yeah, it's I don't know how much money I've got in tools, but
Probably don't want
it's
to. Yeah.
it's a small fortune. Yeah, there's almost everything is specialized.
And is there a divide there between acoustic and electric? You only work on one or the other, or it's all good, or how does
No,
that
I've
work?
got right now. I'm working on 5 acoustics, two of which I'm hoping to have done by the first of the year. I've got one that's going to um, one's going to Kentucky, I think, and the other one's going to Indiana. And then the other three are local. And then I've got a electric that I'm doing that will be done next summer, and that's going to the East Coast. And then I've got another electric, which is a double neck electric that will be going to, it's left-handed, a left-handed double neck that will be going to Florida.
That's a
That's
unicorn right there, huh?
yeah, yeah. So yeah, no, I do all that, and I do repairs too. So I've got a couple of repairs that I've got coming in the next couple of weeks.
Is there a significant difference in time of build between an acoustic and an electric? Because to me, it would seem like an electric would be significantly simpler than an acoustic, but maybe I'm totally off base there.
No, you're right. I mean, a lot of the processes are still the same, but an electric, it's basically getting the slab for the body and cutting it out and then routing, all the compartments for it. And then the neck construction is more or less the same. So, and depending on how they want it finished, but I can do an electric in a few months, a couple months, 2, 3 months. Acoustics will usually take a minimum of 6 months. So sometimes I've had them go over a year, but
Mhm.
so depending on the accoutrement. So a lot of inlay. I have one that's. I mean, it took me 3 months just to do all the inlay. So
I can believe that inlay is not for the faint of heart. That's a whole different level of stuff there. But my wife, I make knives as a hobby, and I told my wife I would make her one, and of course she picked out what seems to be it's an inlaid jeweled handle. So I've got a handle, and then I have to put a sapphire in
mm,
the handle embedded and epoxied in and on, and it seems like no big deal to her, and I'm like, that's the most
yeah, that's a thing.
complicated. Yeah.
That is a thing. What kind of wood are you using for the handle?
So it's a epoxy resin
Oh, okay.
impregnated burl. um don't actually remember because I bought it a while back, but it's probably like a walnut burl or something like
Mm,
that. So it's real
cool.
fancy
Yeah.
looking and all, but eminently mess upable because the epoxy stuff chips. It does not carve like regular wood does. So
Hmm.
it's a whole other level of, yeah. So
Yep.
anyway,
I get it.
good times. Well, why don't we talk a little bit about your books? Because you are a pretty prolific author as well. And in prep for this, I went back and I uh, got a couple of your books, but they're in storage right now. So I went and got the ebook, Considering the Horse, and went back and reread some of that and all to kind of get an idea for some of the questions and tone and how I wanted to approach this conversation with you. So how do you manage to fit all of this stuff in between Aikido, a marriage, a business, guitars, and you're knocking books out every year? That's a lot. How do you manage all that? I guess not watching TV is a big help.
Yeah. Well, that is a big help. Well, I don't write books anymore, so that's that's a thing. I'm writing movie scripts now. So, in fact, we've got one that uh, just got pitched to an executive in Hollywood 2 days ago. So we're waiting to hear back on that, and which is really good to get it that far. So uh, we're feeling pretty good about that one.
So is
Uh,
this the movie you referenced earlier, or has that already been made and we're
oh,
working on number two now?
no, I've actually got that one came out in 2017. It's called Out of the Wild. It's on Amazon Prime right now. And
Okay.
I've also done a couple of short movies. I've written scripts uh, that have been made into short movies. And then this one is a Christmas movie that if it gets if we get the green light on it, which we probably won't get till after the first of the year, but it'll be out next. It'll be on TV next Christmas.
So does that have anything to do with horses? Is this a Hallmark
Nope, it's a
kind of a
Hallmark.
thing, or
Yeah, it's a Hallmark thing. That
okay?
actually started. The idea started as a joke between a friend of mine and I, and ended up turning into a real thing. And I pitched it to a buddy of mine who is I've done a lot of work with, and he's a director, and he's done over 40 movies, and he's done several Hallmark things. And so I pitched the idea to him, and within a couple of days we had a treatment. He pitched it to a buddy of his who's a producer, has worked with a Hallmark, and it just kind of took off. And so now it's in the hands of the exec, and so we'll see how that goes. So that could be a thing. But as far as the time thing goes, um, what I don't get done in the 24 hours during the day, I usually get done during the 8 hours at night. So that's how I that's how I do that. But when I was writing books, I would write in the morning. If I was on the road, I would write in the morning before work, and then I would write at night. Sometimes I'd write at lunchtime. And I write fast, so it doesn't take me long. It only takes me a couple months to write a book, 2, 3 months. I had one that took me longer than that, but yeah, they generally don't. The book usually is in my head, the whole thing. All I have to do is put it down on paper, and they usually go down pretty quick. And if usually what happens, like what we were talking about earlier, is I'll write 2 chapters inside of a week, and then I'll write and I'll get to a sentence and it'll stop me and I can't get past that sentence. I will not my brain doesn't work that way. I can't get past that sentence and keep writing. I have to get that sentence right because it's going to affect everything else that I write. So, but I could spend weeks on that one sentence before I get it the way I want it to read and feel. So, um,
You're nothing if not consistent. That's the same of you're willing to walk a horse for 6 months before trotting him, right? Until we get that sentence just right, and then we can move past it on to the next thing. So
yeah.
that makes complete sense. I do feel obligated to mention here too that your wife Chrissy McDonald is also an author, and she's working on the third book of a trilogy right now. Is that right?
She's almost got it done. She was working this morning on edits of
Okay.
it, and she's a way better writer than I am. Way better.
So when we said the Hallmark movie, like I was envisioning that, because if y'all haven't met his wife Chrissy, she's hilarious. She's absolutely a little ray of sunshine kind of a person. And I'm envisioning you like wrote a little letter and she said that wasn't romantic. And then you said, I'll bet you that's so romantic I can turn that into a Hallmark movie. And I'm envisioning this whole little conversation going on between y'all, but that's just my imagination taking
Yeah.
off.
Well, it's a good one.
And your style of writing is more of a storyteller type. You're not writing a recipe of how to train a horse or anything like that. It's definitely more philosophical and I guess not nonfiction, but it does have that story kind of an element um, to it. So is that kind of how that's just your general way of presenting information? People is just kind of here's the story of how I would look at that. You can extract from it what you will, or
Generally, yeah. Yeah, I grew up in a household full of storytellers, and stories have always fascinated me. And for me, I just wanted it. I wanted my books to be readable, and a lot of how-to books aren't that. I can't read how-to books, and so I wanted it to be approachable. I wanted my books to be approachable, so people could read something and they could relate to it instead of me preaching to somebody from on high. I wanted it to be, here's what's going on, here's what happened to me, and here's some of the hits I took while I was doing it, and here's how it worked out. And then yeah, for me it's been pretty successful as far as the book sales.
do your books feel like your children to you? Do you have no favorites, or are there certain books that resonate more with you and you're like, yeah, I'm really proud of that one. That was I really got to say what I was trying to say in that particular book or anything.
That's a really good question. Chrissy will tell you, I mean, I'll finish a book and I just don't feel like I hit the nail on the head with every book I write. I'm always surprised when they sell. So, I mean, I don't know what it is, and because of that, once I've written them, I don't read them again. People will be quoting things out of my books, and it's like I don't remember which book that's from or,
Hmm.
any of that stuff. And so I don't, and also some of um, pretty much all of the horses and all of the people have been changed, so um, I might change a mare into a gelding. I always change the names of people and horses because if I'm using something as an example, I don't want somebody to read it and think badly of this person. That's not my intent. So, and I don't want the person to recognize themselves or their horse just for that same reason. And I don't want people, bragging that they're in the book as well. That can turn into a thing. So when people will say, geez, with this book, and this horse, Sparky, that's in the book, so I have to think about what horse that was because that wasn't the horse's name, you know. So
I get to a point, I'm sure this is true for you too, that I have so many horses in my head that it's kind of only the ones that had something really odd or they have to be a strong flavor in order for them to stick out from the mob where I really remember that specific horse for this reason, you know.
yeah, well, I mean, with me, I tell people this all the time. I'm really bad with names. I don't carry anybody around with me. So when we're at the clinic, I give them everything I have, and they are the most important thing while I'm working with them and their horse. And as soon as that clinic is over, I forget about them because I'm moving on to the next clinic, and I'm going to have to do the same thing with those people and their horses. And once they're gone, I'm on to the next group of people. And so, uh, because of that, a lot of times I don't recall people's names. It's an intentional thing I do, and I have always done. And I just can't carry all of that around with me. I've got too many things going on. I can't do that. So, um, and so I feel bad because I don't remember people's names or their horses' names. I almost never know their horses' names. Chrissy does. Man, she's got a mind like a steel trap, while mine is like a steel sieve. So,
All right. Well, last question. I know you need to go here. Do you have a favorite guitarist and or anybody that just epitomizes that? And why is it Stevie Ray Vaughan?
Stevie's awesome. He kind of took what Jimi Hendrix did and expanded on it. If we're talking about people who are alive, I would say Billy Strings. I don't know if you've heard Billy or
I
not.
don't believe, no, sir.
You better look him up. Uh,
Okay.
he is quite possibly the hottest guitar player on the planet, besides Tommy Emmanuel. I mean, there's lots and lots and lots of really good guitar players out there, but
So let me ask you this. This is one of those clips I watch every once in a while too. Prince at the Rock and Roll deal Hall of Fame deal on My Heart Gently Weeps. I mean that was pretty magical, huh?
yeah, where he throws his guitar up in the air and it disappears at the end.
I think he just walks off stage. He jams for 3 minutes and then
Yeah, he just
he's
took his
gone.
guitar up and threw it up in the air and walked off stage. It just disappeared,
Oh, it
you
never
know,
came back down.
never came back down. I mean, that's yeah, that was a pretty cool, that was a pretty cool little gig.
Yes, sir.
He was
Um,
he was a monster guitar player,
I
you
think that
know.
was the whole. I just watched the deal on this last night. I don't know if it's true, but Rolling Stone magazine had just done their list of 100 greatest guitar players, and they left him out of it.
Oh no.
And that was his little thumb up in the nose to them. Watch me shred while all these legends just sit there with their mouth open watching me.
Yeah.
See if you leave me off the list again.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, he was a monster guitar player, you know.
so, what
Pretty cool stuff.
what kind of music do you typically play when you're doing gigs?
We do bluegrass, we do originals, we do some country stuff. I'm in a six-piece John Denver tribute band. I'm in a classic rock band, and we're just getting ready to start a trio with the guy that I do one of the the guy who is the head of the John Denver thing and his sister who sings in the John Denver thing. So we're just getting ready to start that here right after the first of the year. So I have played just about every kind of music except for punk and that grunge and that kind of thing. But blues, I've played blues. We do a lot of Allman Brothers in the classic rock band. Um, we do Jackson Brown, Doobie Brothers. You know, it's that kind of band.
Hmm.
Uh,
Any
so
Leonard Skinner in there? Just a
we do some
little.
Skinner, yeah. Give me three steps, and yeah. So we're all over it. And
How
the
about
other guitar player is a really hot player, so it's awesome playing with him. Who he just happens to be also the mayor of the town here. So
okay? That
yeah,
never hurts. Yeah,
no,
no parking tickets for his bandmates. So.
that's right, man. Yeah. So yeah,
Well, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast and having this conversation with me. I've enjoyed it tremendously, and thank you for your time and everything.
well, thank you. This has been awesome. Been a lot of fun.
Yes, sir. Well, I hope I threw you some questions that you had to think about and all a little bit. I was trying to anyway.
Well done.
I did. I will have to say, like, I have had in my notes for 6 months that when I had you on the podcast, when we first met, I spent 3 days trying to make you laugh, and you were really, really tricky. Like I threw out all the stops, caught you off guard, and you just stone faced. And I was like, this guy's gonna wind up hating me if I just keep acting like a clown. Finally, I cracked you on the last day. So I didn't have that on my agenda, but I had written down, I could show you the note in my phone. I wanted to do a Leslie Nielsen on you, where I got you to say, "What's that?" And then, I go back and define the wrong word in the sentence. And that was like a bucket list item for me. And I did not get that done.
Hmm.
So kind of
Well,
like being attacked out of nowhere by our Austrian friend, you can expect me to be applying Leslie Nielsen's on you at every opportunity from here on out. So,
fair enough. I look forward to it. This has been great. I really appreciate you asking me and to do this. We've been talking about it for a while, so
yeah, it's
mm,
been my pleasure. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to use the picture of you with me in a wrist lock for the thumbnail for the, that's a treasured memory for me right there.
oh, well, okay.
Go through life with some experiences, right? I can say legitimately, Mark Rashid told me when he writes books, he's thinking about me.
Yeah.
And he's also put me in a wrist lock. Now, how many people on the planet do you think, have that on their CV other than Daniel Dolphin? I mean, that's a short list. So,
That is a pretty short list because nobody ever asked me to do that.
uh, I had another. So here's a little factoid about me. I used to be heavily involved in the Boy Scouts, and we did a summer camp, and it so happened one of the dads was a guy from Texas, and he was a former professional wrestler.
Hmm.
And so I talked him into doing a little work with me at the announcements in front of camp, where he winds up just like grabbing me and just chunking me out of the picture. And
Hmm.
literally he and I and one other person knew that was going to happen, and everybody else is just
Hmm.
jaw open.
Hmm.
So you get an opportunity, you got to capitalize on it. Then you have a story to tell, right?
Yep, there you go. There you
So,
go.
We'll see you next week for another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I've been your host, Daniel Dolphin.